Okay, so the commit message, and this is really important when I do this, is because I generally only do a commit once I have working code. But because we're in the middle of this, I actually specify it in there, right? Step one, without working code yet, because it's important to understand that's actually my goal is before I do a commit. But in this case, it's going to take a couple of steps, so I didn't yet. All right, so now we know we have an error on the delete. And if you remember, we have an error because of the save trip data. Okay, so in the render function on line 36, which by the way, I can go right there, it's trying to call, right, save trip data, but because render is in its own module, it does not have access to that. So this gives us an opportunity to think about this code related to, right, the local storage that we wrote last time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create another file. I'm going to call it storage.js. I'm going to take those functions, those two functions, even if they're just two functions. I'm going to go over to storage, okay, and do export, get trip data, and save trip data. Okay, let's export them. Now the question would be, where do we need them, right? This is a good example of kind of what I ended last time talking about, because save trip data is going to be needed in render, right? Remember, right here. So why don't we just, inside of this module then, import save trip data from storage.js, because it's the only one we need. We still are going to have broken code at this point because those other functions like get trip data and save trip data are also, well, they're going to be needed in main for sure. And I believe also, we'll find out. I could go look. We know they're needed and rendered. We know this one is. That's what the one we're working on. So we'll kind of see that's kind of the process we're walking through, right? So in addition, we'll come up here and we'll also say import for now. We know we're going to need both of them for here. Get data. So let's just start with that one. Okay. Get trip data from storage.js. Now that we have that, the question is, do we have everything we need? And that's why we go back to DevTools and check it out. So now let's see if we fix the delete. Now on storage.js, what does storage.js needs? It needs a reference to my data. Well, we know how to do that, right? So we could go into main and right here, is that the right? This is on save trip data. Oh, sorry. That's on the render. Save trip data. That's on here is looking for a reference. Right, it's looking for a reference to my data. So where it's called from, right? So we do have to pass the reference to it. So in storage, we do have to pass where we call it my data. Okay. And then under the render function, because we have access to my data in here already, so that's fairly straightforward, right? My data here on the event listener. Cool. Now let's see if that fixed it. Delete. Oh, now we have a problem with the render function. With the here, did you already see it? When we added it here, remember, because these are asynchronous, even though it's inside of here, it's going to lose the reference. Well, I mean, it's not actually the reference to the function, it's the reference to the my data. That's what's needed here. Let's see if that fixes it. Okay. edit. Save trip data not defined. Right. Okay. So now we've ran into that, right? Save trip data in the main. Did I not bring in both? Yeah, I didn't, did I, in the main? Because I was thinking we only needed one. Actually, I knew we needed both, but I was just trying to help you kind of see the idea, right? We do need both in the main. Okay. So now we hit edit. Cool. We now have edit working. Let's hit delete. Delete works. Holy Batman, did we get it? Let's see. Now let's go through, hit delete, hit delete. Cool. Nice. Okay, do a little more testing just to make sure. This looks okay. That looks okay. I do need to work on that average. I think that'll be probably our final thing for here. Although we're not completely done. Let's come back here. Okay. So here's what we have now. So we have an import for render table. We have an import from storage and from main. In storage, we have an export of get trip data. And we have a reference to save data that we're exporting. And when we call save data, we're getting the input, the parameter coming in as my data. This is all good. And then we're passing the my data into render table and passing it around to some of the other functions, specifically the render edit and delete buttons and the index. And remember, that's really important. You have to keep the position the same. If you flip those around, it will break your code. So it seems to me at this point, we are back to working code. Okay, so go ahead and commit this code. I'll say it in here, but now we'll do step 2, finished working code. And the last thing I'm going to give you, okay, so go ahead and commit that. And the last thing I'm going to give you is a challenge. One I actually haven't done, and I will do before I pick it back up and give you my solution. But let's go to main. Is there any more in main that we could put in a module file? What do you think? Could we? Well, I tell you what, I'm going to leave that challenge to you. Can we make, because really, the only thing I think we absolutely would need to have is the event listener. We could even talk about that, but I think we need that one there. Okay. So can you tackle making all the rest of this code in a module? Okay. And what will we call that module? But you give it a name, give it a try, see if you can get it done. And then I will come back with my solution in just a minute. So give that a try, and then you'll commit your code with your attempt.